Hello and welcome to the Nation's Blind Podcast. I'm Melissa Riccobono and I'm here with my co-host,
Neil Lewis, and I'm wearing a black suit with a gold shirt and a purple tie. My hair is bald, but I have salt and pepper, a mustache that leads down to a goatee. I'm audio describing, the visual.
Wow. And you, my friend, are dressed much nicer than what I would audio describe if I were to audio describe. I guess I have to now. I am wearing a Green Bay Packer NFC champion long sleeve t-shirt and some dark colored sweatpants.
And no cheese head? You're not wearing a cheese head?
I'm not wearing a cheese head. I also have, my daughter likes to say I mostly have white hair because I really need some hair color. My hair is short. Yes, but we are audio describing. And why are we doing that?
I have no idea. Why are we doing this?
We're doing that because we are talking about audio description today on the Nation's Blind Podcast. And we have a special guest with us who is going to talk all about audio description. We have Rick Boggs. He is the president and manager of Audio Eyes. And he is here from, I believe, California. Is that right, Rick?
Welcome, Rick.
Here in Los Angeles. Thank you. Welcome.
In Los Angeles. How are you?
I'm doing really well, and I'm glad to be here. And it's a fun discussion with people I haven't had a chance to chat with in a long time. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, when we were investigating blind people and the role we play in audio description, because I think that a lot of people have written off blind people as being the beneficiaries of the service rather than actually being proactive participants in the provision of the service. I love that Rick has dedicated his time being a blind guy, making sure that our value in providing the service is also important. And, I love the work that you do. So glad you were able to join us today.
Thank you, Anil.
Speaking of that, Rick, why don't you talk just a little bit about yourself and then also about your company, because you were giving us some really interesting facts before we started recording. And I want to make sure that our listeners realize who you are and what your company does and just the really interesting facts about your company.
Thanks very much. I'm proud to be a federationist for almost a decade now, and a one-time leader of a chapter of the NFB. And I mentioned that specifically because I was attracted or found a bond, a connection, a synergy with the National Federation of the Blind because of our common viewpoint about two things. One, that the largest barrier to inclusion and participation in society for blind people is the attitudes and misconceptions about blindness and blind people, what those are and what they aren't. And the second, that of inclusion, that basically when we at the NFB, look for a lawyer, we look first for a blind lawyer. When we at the NFB look for a plumber, we look for a blind plumber. I mean, I like the inclusive and resonate with, and I do that. So as the CEO and general manager of Audio Eyes, from the very beginning, I was absolutely committed to including blind professionals. In fact, I am pretty passionate in my viewpoint that no audio description vendor can really confidently produce quality audio description that meets the needs of the blind audience unless they have a blind professional that they refer to for their best practices and quality assurance, at least. Now, we happen to employ blind audio engineers. I employ blind voiceover artists. And we do have blind description quality specialists. We created a curriculum, which we taught at the NFB headquarters there in Baltimore in 2012, where we had blind students, if you will, blind professionals coming for professional training to the NFB and who received certificates of achievement of a 50-hour intensive course to learn to become description quality specialists. And we've continued that practice and teaching those principles, because you can't just take, let's say, my next door neighbor just lost their sight last year and they've never heard audio description, but we're going to bring them in and ask them if they like what we're doing and then say that we're doing great work. That really doesn't hold water in my opinion. I feel that a blind person who goes through a specific training that is similar to audio describer training to understand what audio description can do, can't do, what the limitations are, what are the sort of the rules of the game, if you will. And then we've also added a process that we developed to help a blind person ask the right questions to figure out if the description is accurate or not. It's funny, during that training, we play a scene and then we ask everybody in the room, all the blind folks in the room, what what do you think is on the screen in your own words? And they all describe it. And then when we tell them what's actually on the screen, and they realize that you can receive poor audio description and not even know it if you don't really know how to ask the question. So that was a specific example of what I'm saying, which is I believe the audio description production industry needs to be accountable to the blind consumers. I mean, who cares if a major studio or a major network or a producer personally thinks the description of their program is great? I have to respectfully say to them in the most polite way that I'm glad you like it, or I'm sorry you don't like it. But I have to also say your opinion really doesn't matter because you don't use it, right? It's like having sighted people test. Wasn't there? And I thought NFB published an article about this one time. Haven't we already verified and come to the conclusion that having a sighted person sit down and test screen reader software? Oh, we have a brand new screen reader, a new version of a new product of a new thing. It's better than everything else before because all of our sighted people have tested it out and said that it works great. Haven't we already figured out that that's really an invalid test? Well, I say the same thing about audio description.
I think more importantly, and you said a lot there, so let's unpack it a little bit. I think the key of what you just said is the training that's required, right? Because a lot of people, think audio description is something that anybody can just do off the cuff. So we have to dispel that myth. To break it down, though, you suggested two types of training, which I think are important to differentiate. One is actually training blind individuals to be proactive with respect to really talking about what audio description is and the utility of it, which I think is important. Just like any other product, you want to make sure that it meets the needs of the end user, not just somebody else's, perception of what would be valued. But then the other piece you talked about is the training for the audio describer, period. Mm-hmm. You want to differentiate those two for our listeners?
Absolutely. So audio describers go through a particular training. And I want to say this is the form where this needs to be said. And I do say it everywhere else, but it's really important here. I think it's not celebrated enough, it's not recognized enough, and it's not mentioned enough that audio description itself was created, invented, developed, and first implemented by blind people, right? Cody and Margaret Pfanstiehl were totally blind, and they implemented it at the Washington Ear in 1982. This was a service conceived, devised, and implemented by blind people. I also love the fact that the next step, and almost every step in the progress and development of audio description, the major contributors, again, were blind people. You look at Jim Stovall in 1989 receiving an Emmy for technical achievement because he facilitated a test to see whether audio description could be used on television using the SAP channel, and it was obviously successful. Wow. And he rightfully received an Emmy award for that.
Very interesting.
From the Academy. And then during the 90s, when WGBH, now known as Media Access Group, was installing audio description in movie theaters, they did come to me, and I was their lead publicity person and recruiting blind people for their little focus groups to come to the installation and to give feedback on these things. And also, when the American Foundation for the Blind conducted research in 1997, published as Look Who's Watching, they went again. Ask blind people, do you want audio description? Do you like it? I was one of those who said, no, I don't need it. Who needs it? I can watch TV just fine without it. But then they let us experience it in a full way, and then asked the same survey question again. And I was one of the 70% of people that changed my mind and said, no, actually, I think I would like this. So all I'm saying is all of the development and research and the progress that's been made, and I'd like to take my place in that history. In 2002, when commercial television was forced by the FCC to begin audio describing television programs, I started out with my reverse discrimination plan. I said, I'm not putting anybody's voice on any of our description if they're not at least a person with a disability. And 6 out of the 8 voiceover artists I had were totally blind individuals. I said, for the first 2 years, that's all. I wouldn't hire a sighted voiceover artist. And I did have some sighted audio engineers, but I hired my blind audio engineers first. Nice. I just said, because we don't get a fair shake and a fair opportunity. And that could be a whole nother thing about the rampant discrimination in the entertainment industry against blind people as in any capacity, but that's a different show. But my point is, I really championed the inclusion of blind people in the industry. Don't start describing and telling me as a blind person what I need and what's good for me. Let's get blind people speak up about it. And the original company that I formed was called We See TV. There were various financial and legal reasons that I ended up having to reform the company. Same people, same group, same everything else, but it became AudioEyes in 2007. So still, it's the same group doing the same thing, but it's always been about inclusion. And then I want to give last credit to the one more blind person, which is Dr. Josh Mealy, who headed up the Video Description Research and Development Center with the support of the U.S. Department of Education, who, again, pushed really hard to try to get inclusion of blind professionals into the industry. That's why, and that's when the NFB partnered to provide this training. That training that you asked about, Anil, is, again, twofold. One, you have the blind person audit or go through the same audio description training that a sighted person goes through, which was originally developed by Margaret and Craig Fansteel, two blind people, developed training for sighted audio describers. That's a fact. And in the audio describer community, there is kind of a pecking order or a prestige, if you will, to those whose training that they received was the closest to Craig. There was some people will go, hey, well, I was trained directly by Craig and Margaret, and some people will say, well, I was trained by Alan Woods, who was trained by them. It's like people measure how distant they are from the source of the original training. And I kind of like that, because we're talking about my credibility rests on how close I was to the blind people that created this. And I think that's appropriate.
And I think that one of the things that you're pointing out through this training too is, you said earlier about how in the beginning you were saying, no, I don't need audio description. But then once you experienced it, you said yes. But I think that speaks to the fact that I had audio description before and I was a no, because I really received really bad audio description. The audio describer wasn't giving me content. They were describing stuff that I could rarely find out just by listening to the show. They spoke over the dialogue. So that's why I was saying no. And, now the movies are there and they're so visual and everything. So now if a person knows how to do it correctly, then you can really benefit from it.
That's a really important point. And one thing that really made sense between me and the NFB in the beginning, and how I started the class there in Baltimore in 2012, was I asked the group to come up with adjectives to describe audio description. How would you refer to audio description? And then when I ended with my own comment, I said, I would call it dangerous. And I asked the students, why do you think I would say audio description is dangerous? And the answer to that is very close to what you were just saying, Anil, which is poor audio description, especially if it were to be widespread and widely visible to the public, like all over public television, everywhere else, done really poorly, will do great damage toward reinforcing every misconception about blind people and what they know, what they don't know, and what they're capable of that you can ever imagine. As sighted people listen to audio description that is telling us the plot as if we don't know. If sighted people are watching description that says, John's crying over the death of his mother when we just saw his mother die in the previous scene, because people will go, oh yeah, that's right. If you're blind, you don't know what's going on.
It's insulting.
It is. Yeah. And this is why quality is really important, and why I'm very disappointed that more blind people haven't picked up on the risks of doing exactly what I'm saying, of reinforcing misconceptions about blindness, and to speak up and yell about these scripts and say, hey, this script is condescending. It's telling me stuff I already know, because the writer doesn't have an accurate perception of blindness. I'll just say this last point on that topic, which is I have spoken to some researchers, some psychology researchers, and I really want to find funding. And there's a professor in the University of Hawaii who's really anxious to do it. There's another guy too. I want to find funding to conduct a study where they analyze the scripts written by professional experienced audio describers. And they also submit, those audio describers submit themselves to a battery of tests designed by psychologists to determine their perceptions of blindness and blind people. I would then like a study to be conducted about whether you can detect evidence of a person's relationship or perception of blindness and blind people in their audio description writing, because I believe I can.
This has been a really fascinating conversation, but we're here for a really exciting and very, I don't know, I think I said the word cool way too much, but very exciting and a very interesting reason. And you want to tell us a little bit about what your company is going to do on Sunday?
Well, another milestone in the history of the widespread use of audio description. I want to first say that we are going to provide live audio description on broadcast television, which has only been happened in a handful of occasions, less than 5 times in the United States. And unfortunately, I will say it, in general, the reception to live audio description on broadcast television has not been the most positive overall that it could and should be. But we have an opportunity to do this. For us, it'd be the first time for live network broadcasts. We have the opportunity to do this for a really significant event. For the first time, the Academy Awards on ABC television, put on by the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Science, is going to be live described on Sunday, April 25th.
Nice.
That is super exciting.
It is. They're doing the pre-show also and the awards and the post-show. So 5.5 hours, if you can imagine that, 5.5 hours of live description.
That's challenging. Live description is probably the most difficult, of audio description, because it's not something that you can script in a real way, and then you can't rewind and redo. It's right there in the moment. And there's some stuff that's going to happen that you just cannot predict. But that's also one of the things I really like about audio description, when it's live theater, et cetera, because it's just nice to be able to be in that moment and experience it just like everybody else in that moment.
I think so too.
So tell us just a little bit about this. So it's going to be 5 hours of description. I'm assuming or thinking that you're not going to have the same person, just like you wouldn't have an interpreter, probably not closed captioning, but signing for someone who's deaf for a 5-hour period. I'm assuming you're going to have maybe a couple of people or a few people that will take shifts. And I guess I also, just because it's live and because you can't pre-record it and plan it, what should we be expecting, and maybe what things, won't we be able to expect, or what things that, if we're doing something in a pre-recorded way, might we be able to do that maybe we're not going to be able to do as well, or just be able to do, we'll have to do differently because it's a live show that is being described?
I love the question, Melissa. And I should say that I'm really passionate that blind consumers become more educated about what is possible and what's not possible in audio description in general, but specifically live audio description, because of its limitations and the risks that Anil points out of things you don't expect and the way things go. So sure, let's get into this. And to answer your question, yes, we will have 2 describers, and one will be describing the pre-show and the post-show, and one will be describing the 3-hour awards event itself. There were technical reasons why we couldn't do shorter shifts. A lot of times there's either business reasons, contractual reasons, licensing reasons, employment law reasons, or as I said, technical reasons that influence what you do and what you don't do in description, both pre-recorded and live. And this is one of those examples where it had to be that because of certain technical reasons that I won't bore everybody with. But referring to what you suggested about audio description being more challenging, it certainly is. And I must say, there are far more describers who are comfortable writing scripts than who are comfortable standing live and providing description on the fly without the ability to stop and rewind and do it over again. And good reason.
It's just like play-by-play commentary for sports events. You got to have a skill set and a natural ability to do that. So, but the training enhances your ability to capitalize on a lot of the opportunities. But man, some of it's got to be like ingrained in an individual.
I think so too. I think you have to, there's a certain way of thinking and a certain verbal communication ability, access to, vocabulary and so forth, that is just a natural gift that some people have more than others. The training itself for live audio description helps you with your technique. So the 2 things that a live audio describer really has to learn to do is to quickly assess what is the most important thing to describe, because as we all know, you can't describe everything. There's just no way. They say a picture paints 1,000 words, but I'm saying 1,000 words does not paint a picture. It's not in the same detail that when you're going to see it visually. It'll give me a picture for sure, but how accurate that is, well, that kind of depends on the words and my interpretation of those words. So a live describer has to look at this and go, what's the most important thing here? And there are many, many exercises that we use in the training to teach people how to identify the most important thing, and the context, the show, the intent of the show, but also, those matter, but also the elements of what you're actually looking at right now at this moment. So sort of the macro picture and the micro picture all come into it. But then the second thing that training helps live describers do is learn how to become as efficient as possible with their words, while remaining descriptive. So having a great vocabulary for a variety of verbs and a variety of adjectives, and being able to speak in more of a note taker style. So one of the biggest differences between pre-recorded description and live description is the language that you use. In pre-recorded description, the standards are to use complete sentences. In live description, fragments are the tools of the trade. So you've got to jump in and jump out, because number one rule in description, we we have a principles of description document that is a summary of the national standards for description. But one of the rules is don't talk over the dialogue, don't trample the program, right?
Right.
The description is not the show.
Right.
We've all heard some of the stuff out of the UK where when the describer talks, they turn the description down so low you can't even hear the background. It's like, hey, well, I'm not watching the description, I'm watching the show, So we don't want to trample, but in a live situation, how do you know when the person's going to talk next? In a live program, the audio describer has to determine what's the most important thing, what's the most efficient way to describe that, and then where's my timing, where's a hole, anticipate a person's speaking pattern and say, I think they're going to pause here, or they're saying or they're stopping. Insert that description in that little gap and if someone starts talking, try to get out as fast as you can. That's a tricky game.
Yeah.
There's many variables that can make a live audio description event successful or not. One of those is whether the describer describes the things that the blind audience is most interested in. And being a blind person myself, I have to admit, sometimes I'm expecting there to be something interesting to see when really there isn't. The camera's showing a static shot of something. And the describer goes silent for a second. I'm like, what's going on?
Yeah, what am I missing out on? Yeah, there's nothing.
And
Nothing.
And the protocol is the describer's not supposed to say nothing is happening. So if
we might need to change that protocol then.
Yeah. So as consumers, we should go, well, if they're not describing, that means it's the same thing it's always the last thing you heard. So if the describer says, Sally reads notes on a podium, and then there's a long pause. We as blind consumers need to assume that's still happening. She's not going to keep repeating it over and over, even if Sally keeps doing that for the next minute, right? So that's what we were told, and that's what's going on. Also, we have to recognize there's a diversity of opinions about what's most important to the blind.
You mean all blind people don't think alike and feel the same?
Yeah. So, and of course, the research that the AFB did shows that there are some factors that influence that. How long has a person been blind? Could they ever see, and all this different stuff. And I've noticed, and I can usually tell by people's comments on description, that sort of what is their relationship to their blindness and all that sort of stuff. But in any case, the describer isn't aiming to please one particular sector of the blind population. They're trying to say, well, whether you guys know it or like it or not, this person's attire is really pretty basic and uninteresting and not anything you wouldn't expect. On the other hand, the lighting is really unusual, so I'm going to describe that. The describer should describe the things we do not expect. For example, they say, John walks on stage. They're not going to say, wearing clothes, John walks on stage, because the assumption is that he is wearing clothes, right?
But they will say John walked on stage nude, because that's unexpected.
That's right.
Yes. Yeah. So or in a flesh-colored bodysuit.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So when the describer is choosing what to say, they're trying to predict what we would already assume and not say those things, right? And because that, again, that also goes into the condescending thing,
Yeah.
Right.
But more importantly, it's efficiency and time. You only have time for that. Right. So tell us the things that we wouldn't expect, or tell us the things that seem the most. The describer's trying to look at what's on the stage and think of the producer, the director, the people running the show. What are they trying to emphasize to those who can see it? And sometimes that's easily detectable by the positioning of the props or the furniture or the set, or by the lighting, because the producers are deliberate about what they're trying to draw the visual attention to. And so if the describer goes to describe something and the blind person is saying, yeah, but I want to know this other thing, you may not get what you're looking for, because the describer's attention is supposed to be directed to what the focus of the show seems to be. I always say this: what's the experience of the sighted person? And try to direct the blind person's experience to be as close to that as you can get. So while if there's a flashing strobe light on one person, near the front of the stage, clearly someone who designed this show wants the sighted audience to pay attention to that. I don't want my describer, no matter how interesting, to not tell me that, but instead tell me about the really cool multicolored shiny piano, that Bradley Cooper is sitting next to, or whatever the case might be. Right. It might be cool.
So I I do have a question though, because I heard a rumor that it might be possible to have some interactions with the describers on social media during the show. Is that correct, or is that just a rumor? And I mean, I'm thinking two things. I'm thinking, okay, so when you have any kind of award ceremony, it's always best dressed, worst dressed, right? And I'm thinking, well, there's no way somebody's going to be able to describe every dress. And even if they do, audio describers, as far as I understand it, they're supposed to take their opinions out. Like, oh my gosh, that is the ugliest dress I've ever seen, should not ever come out of the mouth of the describer.
Right.
And so, I mean, that's one thing that I'm thinking of, like, okay, if I would want to know about the dresses, I would actually want to be able to ask the describer their opinion. You know, what looks good about this dress, or what do you know, is it eye-catching in a good way or a bad way? And I know that's all very objective, right? And even the worst dress, best dress are very, you know, subjective and everything else. The other thing though that I was just thinking about is, I as a blind person don't know what the actual Oscar award looks like. I know it's a statue. I think it's gold. I don't really know how big it is. I don't know if it has, I think it's a person, but I don't really know. Like, I just realized this. You know, I've been watching the Oscars for years, and I just realized, you know what? I kind of have this picture in my head about what an Oscar looks like, what I think it looks like. I don't really know if I'm right. And again, the describer might not think or know, you know, there's other people that have lost their vision later who know what an Oscar looks like. So will there be any way that we can interact and kind of ask some of those questions while this is going on? Or if we can't do it this time, could that maybe be something for, especially for live TV broadcasts, that we could maybe think about incorporating later for future ones?
Right. A few wonderful topics and questions there, Melissa, and I'll do my best to cover these. So I'll go in reverse order. As for the description of the Oscar itself, I'm going to boast that I really think we have two live describers that are among the best describers in the country. I personally believe that Terry Grossman is the best describer, period, audio describer, otherwise. And I think that that's defensible by her vitae. But I will say this, knowing that this is an important cultural event in America and an historic event, being the first time that the Oscars will be described, I made sure that we have absolutely the finest, best trained audio describers to do the show. And I know, without even asking, that Terry Grossman will describe the Oscar, because she does not assume that blind people know what things look like. So she'll find a way to get that in. As for the best dressed, I'll just address that briefly. If you think about it, it isn't useful for an audio describer to say, she walks in a beautiful gown. Because now, if you ask the blind people, and this is the test we use in our company. We take the blind people and we say, okay, what do you, we play a description. We go, what does this mean to you? I'll pull a conference call together, even with blind people across the country. I'll get 10 blind people on the phone if we have a question about whether our description is good. And I can do that and go, hey, we want to play something for you. What do you think this is? And then they describe it back in their own words. And that's how we tell whether our description is any good or not. But if you say, she walks in a beautiful gown, and then you ask 10 blind people, what does the gown look like? It's all over the map. So you haven't told them anything. So we don't use judgment words like that. We pick aspects of the gown that makes the describer think that it's beautiful. Well, what is it that makes you think? That's what we tell in our training. Why would you call it beautiful? What is it about it and then use those words to describe it? Okay. So when it comes to the dress, you just describe what it looks like and leave the judgment call to the blind audience. Just like there's no words on the screen telling the sighted people who's more beautiful, less beautiful. It's just they see the dress and they have their own reaction to it. And then going to the beginning, I am very pleased to say that with the cooperation of ABC Television and the American Motion Picture Academy of Arts and Science, AudioEyes is going to be very active on social media during the event. All of the parties involved here would like the blind audience to have the ability to provide feedback while it's going on. We're talking about 5.5 hours of content. We don't want to wait till it's all over to get, so what'd you guys think? We want people to be active. We want you to be active on social media. AudioEyes will have staff members monitoring social media and responding, answering questions.
Nice.
And we will be giving summary comments to our describers during the commercial breaks, and also between the pre-show and the actual show, and between the actual event and the post-show, giving them, here's what people are saying, here's what they like, don't like, want more of, want less of. So I'm just happy to say it's the coolest thing, isn't it? That it's a live described broadcast, and blind people actually can have an impact, can have input into what service.
Real time
All about
engagement.
accountability, right?
Now, is there going to be a hashtag, or can you share your Twitter handle so that people can find you? I guess you're saying Twitter, right? Or is there Facebook?
Twitter, Facebook too?
I'm going to use the
yeah,
hashtags that are already being used so that the conversation is out there. But I know I'm also going to add at Oscars AD. So at OSCARSAD, Oscars AD.
Nice.
I saw some tweets this morning, and I can't remember what hashtag they were using, but whatever the hashtags are that are already out there, we'll also use those so that we're part of those conversations. But
what's the Audio Eyes Twitter handle? Are you at Audio Eyes?
We are at Audio Eyes. That's right.
Oh, look at that. See, Melissa, I'm getting this whole
I see
thing.
Yeah. I see, Neil. I see.
We have a Facebook page, Audio Eyes Facebook page, and we'll be receiving comments and putting things up there that are a little more, longer messages and so on and so forth. We will be active on the most active Facebook page called Audio Description Discussion, and all blind consumers ought to really weigh in there because the industry is watching. Executives at the studios and networks do watch that page. So blind people, it bothers me that there's another service I won't mention where a lot of blind people talk about audio description, and they talk amongst themselves, and they don't realize how many studio execs and network execs lurk on that service. And I have been yelling to the people that run that particular thing, saying, you need to tell this audience, you need to come up with some policy about outing who is on this list, because it's blind people should know that their conversations about description are being listened to by people that can make the difference. But that way they know if the people don't do anything about it, that they're not responsive or whatever, or that they need to try to get in touch directly and ask why, right? So in any case, the audio description discussion page on Facebook, fortunately, some of the corporate executives actually have spoken up there. So they've identified themselves as being present. That's very nice, and we appreciate that, right? I mean, if you can get someone from some studio or some network to speak up and ask a question or give some feedback to us directly, well, what's better than that, right? So the social media interaction is the first. That hasn't been done before, and I'm really happy. And it pushes toward accountability to the audience. The industry, audio description industry, needs to be more accountable. The companies that produce it need to have professionals employed in their midst, and they need to listen to what the consumers have to say. The consumers need to recognize that the industry should be accountable to us, and they need to speak up about it and say, hey, I like this, I don't like that, or could we try this, or here's an idea, whatever it is. Blind people need to feel they have something to contribute here, because after all, the service is for us.
Well, I'll be honest and tell you that I have not watched the Academy Awards like forever. So I'm looking forward to this opportunity just for the reason that we're talking about now. It's just so much going on, and it really takes away from enjoying the experience when you're, depending on someone else who's also trying to enjoy it, to give you information, and you don't want to be overly needy. So I'm looking forward to actually being able to watch it this year.
Yeah, I am too. Just really quickly, the pre-show and post-show, are those also on ABC, or are they on one of the partner networks? And also, ABC. Just one more question, just the basics. How do you, if you've never turned on your audio description for a live event or for TV shows, how would you go about doing that?
Great question, great point. So depending on how you're watching, the specific technical details vary a little bit, but the overall idea is this. If you turn on your local ABC affiliate station on a television, either using cable or satellite or an antenna, doesn't matter how you do it, and you turn to your ABC affiliate in your city, you will hear the main program that everybody in the world hears. If you want to hear the description, you need to use the audio menu in your whatever device you're using, a cable box, a satellite receiver, or just the television itself. Use an audio menu to select alternate audio. And unfortunately, depending on the manufacturer, they label it differently. Some will label it Spanish, some will label it alternate audio, some will label it second audio program, or SAP. But when you switch to the alternate audio channel, now you will hear the same thing that you were hearing in the main frequency, but you will hear the description also. So you're going to hear a mix of the program and the audio describers. And then you have to, if you ever want to turn that off, then you have to go back to switching just to the main regular audio, the default audio program for that channel. Now, if you switch to your affiliate, and this would be a good time for people to check before the event, because nothing will be able to happen during the event. Right now, today, when you're hearing this, turn on your ABC channel, your network, and make sure that your SAP channel, your alternate audio channel, is actually working. You won't hear description on ABC except during primetime television, and Audio Eyes does describe all of the primetime programs for which audio description is available. So you can listen to various programs in the evening and hear audio description, but test it and make sure it's working, because sometimes in some areas, if some engineer is asleep at the switch, even though legally they're supposed to pass it through to you, they might not turn it on. And I've heard some rumors about Baltimore. So I'm not living in Baltimore, I can't vouch for myself, but if there's trouble, you have this opportunity to notify ABC. And certainly if you email us at Audio Eyes, you can go to audioeyes.com and use our link on our website, or just send me an email at rick@audioeyes.com. I have access to people that can make the difference, but your local station, you definitely want to contact them and say, hey, how come the AD is not working? We're going to need this on Sunday.
And that's a really good point, because I remember the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade was described this year. And I was very excited about it. And unfortunately, we turned it on, and no matter what we did, it wasn't working. And it turned out that, it wasn't just us. It was that for whatever reason, our local affiliate wasn't passing that through. And just like you said, by that time it was too late, but right. It was disappointing. We were really looking forward to, I was looking forward to for really the first time hearing the parade described in a very different way, especially when there's musical numbers and things like that. And I just thought, oh my gosh, what a cool idea. And then I wasn't able to do it. So, so that's a very good point.
Every blind person I know who has listened to audio description has had a frustrating experience of one kind or another, either in the movie cinema or on television.
Yeah.
The advocacy that's been done, that led to the more widespread use of description was good in getting some description to become available and to be produced, but it kind of failed in terms of making sure that we connected the dots and that it was available, that actually got passed through. I mean, how much description was on television in 2002 and 2003, but none of us could watch it because we couldn't, the TVs weren't accessible. I know I couldn't turn on my own work, right? We were describing for ABC, and I had to get my neighbor to come over and turn it on. It's like, can you turn this on? Right? And there still are those kinds of problems out there. And I just have to say to blind consumers, we really need to stop being so grateful to get anything as though we don't deserve the same thing that the rest of society gets. And just so many people I see on social media, well, we really shouldn't complain. Your description, I know you think it was terrible, but isn't it better than nothing? And don't you remember the days when we had nothing? And I go back to Anil's comment at the beginning of this. No, because if it's going to be terrible, I, for one, am not going to listen to it. So, and we deserve it. Think about this, you guys. They spend a lot of time and a lot of money. And I could quote you the numbers because I know people that work in this industry. I've been in this industry since 1987. They spend a lot of time and money making the visual aspect of programs. And I don't care if we're talking YouTube, social media, or if we're talking broadcast television, a lot of time making the visual element pristine. They do what's called color correction that the average consumer can't even tell whether it's been color corrected or not. They go to an extent to meet the highest specification for the highest professional. People are watching on 4K TVs. They got cameras that cost tens of thousands of dollars and lenses too. They've got post-production software that makes they get the lighting. I've been on over 100 sets. You'd be amazed at what they spend on getting the lighting exactly right and just right. And then they color correct it to make it perfect. They spend a fortune of money and time to get the visual to be pristine. So if they're going to throw some poorly recorded, half-baked script with a person that doesn't have any skills to throw some description at us just to check a checkbox, then we're really being treated poorly. And I think that our experience just as important as anyone else's.
I also think they're missing the business case, right? Because it's not about doing this to make it accessible for blind people. If they really are true artists, they should recognize that by adding this, it's not just enhances the experience for us. I mean, it enhances the experience for everyone. I have a lot of sighted friends that also really think that that audio description component of the video has value. Looking at it as checking a box is missing an opportunity to really make their particular piece of art that much better.
I completely agree. And there are long haul truckers who love to listen to this stuff instead of the radio because they can watch TV and know what's going on the screen and while they're still got their eyes on the road. Yeah. My kids, 3 children that have perfect vision, but 2 of the 3 of my kids prefer to watch with audio description.
Yeah. My friend cleans her house and watches movies using audio description. And then I have other friends that are looking at the screen and the audio description points out stuff that they just would have missed. So, there's just such a value beyond viewing this as an accommodation or some type of accessibility piece. There really is true business and artistic efficacy in providing audio description.
I agree. And I think the consumers themselves need to stop thinking of it as a little accommodation just thrown our way, as if, at least we're, they throw us some peanuts. No, it's like, no, we're being valued and included as equal members of society. And, our numbers matter just as much as anyone else's when Nielsen's doing their ratings, right? Blind people count too.
Yeah, but I love what you've really reinforced in all of your comments. It is up to us, blind people, to really work with individuals that are providing this service to bring it to that higher art form, to make sure that it has real utility. Just like you said, I was smiling as you were talking about it. So many times, we've been denied access to information. And then when we finally get access to information, we're like overjoyed. Like I remember when the scanning technology was first out there and everybody's like, oh, wow, now I can read all of my junk mail. And then, of course, that lasts for about 3 days when you realize there's a lot of junk mail. And then we get to the point where we are just as discerning as any other consumer, right? And making sure that what we're provided really has utility and value for us. But it's nice when what we're seeking to receive for our benefit also helps others benefit as well.
I love the point you make, Emil.
Well, I think that this has been a fascinating conversation. I mean, we could talk forever. Is there anything else, though, that you would like our listeners to know before we wrap up our episode here?
Yes, 2 things. And they may sound like a repetition, but it's important. Speak up about audio description anywhere that you can. Make a little bit of an effort. And if it's easier for you to just reach out to Audio Eyes on the web and say, hey, who should I be talking to? And we'll give you some contacts for you to reach out, but tell people the value that it has and point out, when you think someone's doing a poor job or when you think someone's doing a great job, because the opinions matter more than you think. The executives at the networks who pay for these things have said, point blank to me, well, if you could verify, of course, Rick, you're going to say your description is great, but we would really like to verify that objectively by other, consumers. Can you point us to any social media or anything where anyone says these kinds of things? So I'm saying, speak up about it is what I'm saying. And then the last thing is for this specific event, this coming Sunday, just enjoy like we all do that there's progress being made and inclusion continues to grow and become more pervasive. And participate because it's being offered. And when an organization goes to the extent that ABC and AMPAS are going to make it available, let's respond and watch it and comment and say, hey, we watched. If that's all you say is I was watching, then that does a lot of good.
And the National Federation of the Blind is actually offering an audio description challenge, getting people to get other individuals who otherwise would not be watching something using audio description to do that. And this is a great opportunity to encourage people because many of my friends are going to be watching the Academy Awards anyway. So I'm going to challenge them to turn on their audio description as well and get a sense of what this is all about.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Rick, so much for joining us and talking about this. Again, Sunday, April 25th, and all you did say before, all the pre and post show, everything will be on ABC, correct?
ABC television, and I'm happy to say that ABC took the position, if we're going to do this, let's do the whole thing, because there was discussion of should we just do the war, and they were like, no, let's do the whole thing. And I love their attitude. I thought it was terrific.
Nice.
And I think the pre-show, especially if people are walking the red carpet or, things like that, I mean, that's really where a lot of the very cool things happen. That's wonderful that they decided to do the whole thing. And they're showing me that it's not just that they're throwing me a little peanut, right? They're throwing me as a blind person, you know, the whole
Experience. The
peanut butter
full
sandwich,
experience.
enchilada. I was going to say
Yeah.
that has everything to do with peanuts. So I bad metaphor, but there you go.
The
I
whole
think that's
payday
true,
candy
Mark.
bar.
The whole payday can't see there. And for Anil, it all comes back to chocolate. So there you go.
One way or another.
One way or another. That's right. Well, thank you so much, Rick. And we really hope that people enjoy listening to this and finding out about this. And we at the Nations Blind Podcast, I mean, please participate in social media and let Rick's company and the studios and everybody else know that you're watching. But also, you know, we at the Nations Blind Podcast would love to know that you watched this event and your thoughts on it. So you can definitely reach out to us. You can call us at 410-659-9314, extension 2444, and leave us a voicemail regarding your thoughts about the description.
You can email us at podcast@nfb.org.
You can also find us on Facebook by searching for National Federation of the Blind.
And if you're on Twitter, you can find us at NFB_voice. And remember to look for the hashtag OscarsAD.
OscarsAD.
Oscars 80.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Well, Rick, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. And you're actually demonstrating to all of our listeners that as a blind person, you can live the life you want.
And blindness does not need to hold you back.